Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tami, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with fibro fog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami, and this is episode 136. If you find yourself constantly chasing new wellness trends or ticking off an endless list of self-care rituals, this episode is for you. Today, we are exploring how self-care can turn into self-sabotage and how healing work can become a burden rather than a relief. You might actually need to do less in order to feel better. We'll share the science that shows us that focusing too much on eliminating pain can, in fact, amplify it. And we'll discuss the fine line between acknowledging the power our minds have over our physical pain and recognizing when our pain has real, tangible causes. Sometimes true healing requires us to get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. Today, I am joined by Dr. Andrea Moore. She is a doctor of physical therapy, board-certified orthopedic specialist. She is a nutritional therapy practitioner and a certified life coach. And while those are her professional qualifications, she is also a mom, a wife, and a recovering health perfectionist. She also has her own chronic pain story, which she will be sharing in today's episode. Her entire career path has been based on trying to fix everything that is, quote, wrong with her. She has dealt with chronic pain, digestive issues, post-concussive syndrome, brain fog, anxiety, depression, PMS, and ADD, all by the age of 26. She now helps those suffering with chronic pain, whether it be physical or emotional pain, to find harmony and safety within their bodies so that they can focus on the things that matter most: family, friends, and finding joy in life through different passions. You can find Dr. Andrea Moore on her podcast, Unweaving Chronic Pain. And if you look back last month in May, I was a guest on her podcast. So you can hear another conversation between Dr. Andrea and I on that episode. We'll link to that in today's show notes. I also want to remind you, as always, the information that you will hear us discuss in today's podcast should not be considered medical or mental health advice, nor is it intended to replace consulting with a qualified physician or other healthcare provider. We hope that we give you some new ideas that you can take and discuss with the professionals in your life. And of course, if you need help, we will have information on how to connect with Dr. Andrea or with me or one of my coaches in today's show notes. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/136. Hi, welcome. I'm so glad to have you on my podcast.
I know. I'm so excited to talk to you more. We had so much fun the last time.
I know. Now, I read your bio a few minutes ago in the introduction, but I would love to hear more about your own chronic pain story. Like I said to you right before we started recording, you're not just a doctor who knows something about chronic pain. You have your own experience of it, which I think is, it's going to sound funny, but I think is fantastic. Not fantastic that you have your own chronic pain, but that you can talk to your patients and clients in a way from experience, right?
Absolutely. Yes. And I always tell people, I feel like my story is so convoluted, but I will do my best to kind of gather a few parts of it. In that I had chronic pain for as long as I could remember. My sister, and has we're talking now as adults and stuff, is like, yeah, I remember you always complaining about your joints hurting and, things like that. Except my whole life, it just got blown off. I grew up with parents who are from communist Eastern Europe, like from Czechoslovakia. They don't have time for anything that is not your leg is literally falling off. My dad's a doctor, my mom's a dentist. If anyone has medical parents, that just makes it worse because it's like literally, unless you're dying, they're like, you're fine.
Right.
So I did not obviously know this at the time. So I had chronic pain my whole life. And I remember really acutely in physical therapy school, which is not why I went to physical therapy school at all, by the way, because I actually had a very, it sounds weird, but a lack of awareness of my chronic pain because I would have never called it that. I was in pain all the time and I was aware I was. I just always thought that I was being a baby about it. Like I thought everybody else was experiencing this too, and that I was the one who couldn't handle it. So, like I remember in class, like just kind of being so uncomfortable sitting because like my hips and low back would just be like so irritating. Like I could not sit for any like given period of time or stand for, very long, things like that. I worked out a ton though. And so it's like my legs would like give out going up and down the stairs from like knee pain and, things like that. And I just thought, I'm like, oh, I worked out really hard at the gym and everything was brushing it off, brushing it off. And I remember this moment after working for probably a year or so. And in PT school, you're kind of trained to ask somebody comes in, maybe they come in for knee pain or back pain. And he always asks the question, like, what else hurts? And after having a certain number of people be like, nothing. And I'd be like, I mean, what do you mean nothing else hurts? Obviously, something else has to hurt. And like, I remember this one guy in particular, I have no idea why, but I was almost like pressing him. He's probably like, what is wrong with my PT? I mean, something else has to hurt. Like, what do you mean nothing hurts? Your shoulder. And he's like, no, like I'm literally fine everywhere else. And it was this moment of like, not everyone else has this. Like, whoa, mind blown. And so that was a moment that was like, huh, this is really interesting. Maybe I don't have to live like this. And so that really started me on my own journey because I realized that I didn't have, despite having my doctorate in physical therapy, nothing I was really doing to try to help myself because I was doing things to try to help, right? Like I was trying to incorporate exercises and things like that. Nothing really was getting to it. I even was seeing PTs and I was kind of getting like nothing's really wrong. Like we can't figure anything out, right? Which is kind of where I just got the idea of like, well, this just must be what everybody has, and I'm being a baby about it. And over the next year or two, I really started to find some things that worked. And we can go into that more because there's not one easy fix. There's no there wasn't one thing, but it was a combination of things that I really started feeling like really good in my body. And I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. And then I had a car accident, really bad car accident in 2013 that put me out of work for 6 months and left me with post-concussive syndrome. And I really got to experience what it's like to have that like invisible chronic issue that is completely blown off by everybody, that nobody takes seriously, that you can't really describe. I remember one time walking in somewhere, like, and it was the first time I had been back there in a while. And she's like, oh, how are you? And I was just like, I'm okay. And I was just like, my head is just still, I just really feel out of it all the time. And she's just like, sounds like a case of the Mondays. And I was like, no, like I have lived at this point, whatever, a lifetime of 26 years of Mondays. I know what a Monday feels like. This is not what a Monday feels like. And it's like, you just can't get it across. And yes, it set me on a whole nother journey because the things that I had been previously doing weren't enough. And so over a period of a long time, I have developed this very wide array and tested and tried everything under the sun and have developed this very wide toolbox and also just gotten really familiar with what works, what doesn't, the nuances, the individualism that you need, and really also the importance of the energy behind how we're approaching healing, because that is one of the biggest game changers for me. And where I was being blocked from really getting better. And so, yes.
In a nutshell. Oh,
Yeah, that was really long, but also feels like such a teeny part, but yes.
right. I think everyone listening can relate to that, right? I could tell you my story in a couple of sentences or a few minutes, but it's just the tip of the iceberg, right? And there's so much more underneath that to your story. So thank you for sharing that. And I think that last thing that you were talking about, the energy that we chase after healing with, is such an important piece. And I would love to talk about that with you. Because for me, one of the big shifts that came for me was when I realized that I wasn't doing things because of my fibromyalgia, or more, I wasn't not doing things because of my fibromyalgia. I was choosing not to do things because I knew it would move me closer to feeling better. So that for me, it was that shift from having my world revolving around my fibromyalgia versus having my world revolving around how do I feel better? But sometimes there can be this sort of frantic energy, just like chasing the next treatment, trying the next thing. Who's the next doctor? I've got another appointment. And like you're both, like I said, this frantic energy of doing so many things, but also not doing anything because it also kind of feels like everything's sort of put on hold until we find like the answer.
Hmm. Yes, I think you nailed it in terms of that like frantic energy of it feels like you're doing everything or your day is so full. But if you really like look at it from a very objective, like someone was just filming you, it's like, oh, I did absolutely objectively, again, that you could see on a video screen, like nothing today.
Right. You know, you were sitting on the couch doing nothing, but nothing as in you're not moving the needle, right? You're not actually getting better. You're busy doing all of these things, taking all these supplements, doing all these exercises, trying the next thing, doing all this research, reading this book. But are you feeling better?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I think so many people, myself included, get caught in the trap of life like almost becomes healing. Like their life is centered around all these activities, but they're never actually living life. I actually had an experience just the past week that someone had reached out and we were just kind of emailing back and forth. So I don't know a ton of details, but basically I asked, hey, what are your goals? Like, what are you building towards in life? And her response really broke my heart because I think it shows where this work that I love and stand behind and changed my life has just gotten taken to a place that it was never meant to be used at. Because she listed out, and this was a long reply she had to me, and every goal was some type of thing or technique she had heard. It was like, every day I'm going to do, this is why Huberman came up, like 20 Huberman sighs, which I have no idea what the hell those are. Like 20 of this type of breath. I'm going to breathe this way for 5 minutes. I'm going to do this, some person's meditation about pain. And I was like, this isn't a life goal. And I specifically asked, what are you building towards in life? Not like, oh, what are your habits that you want to accomplish every day, which is a very different question. And I find more and more that people are answering in this way that when you say, like, hey, what are your goals? Like, what are your goals for life? Like, what do you want out of your days? People's responses are these self-care things that are beautiful, right? I have no idea what Huberman sighs. I wasn't dissing on them. I'm sure they're great. I sigh a lot. I'm sure it's fantastic. No, but is that really like what you want written on your gravestone of like, I breathed super well, you know? And I used to say this when I was doing nutritional therapy was, do you want she ate really well written on your gravestone? Is that what you're doing this for? Or are you eating really well or doing this meditation or these mindfulness techniques so you can go live your life?
Right. These are tools that are there for us to use. We don't exist to do those things. Those things exist to help us live our lives. Right. And I see this so often with students in my class, with clients I work with. Sometimes people actually have to do less to feel better.
Totally. Well, I can't tell you how many people I see that I don't take things away. It is a whole session where we are breaking down their program but usually it's because I'm like, you should not have a 2.5 hour morning routine. Like that is right. And it's like, there's nuance. Everything is individual. It's like, what is actually in your routine, right? Because what people call, a morning routine can look very different from person to person. And that we were talking about this at the beginning. It's like, ultimately, you should feel better. Like you should love, like if you have a morning routine that works for you and you're like, man, when I do it, like I can go out and live, I can go and do whatever it is that you want to do in your day, like because I did it and it lights me up and I get excited to get out of bed to go do it. Not that you have to like, I think waking up excited is a very overrated thing sometimes. So like it's
Agreed.
okay if you don't wake up excited. I rarely wake up excited. I'm not a morning person. I'm not a get out of bed person. Once my feet hit the floor, I'm golden. But man, the rolling over and putting my feet on the floor is like miserable. And that's been something I've done a lot of work around to be like, it's fine that I don't wake up. Like I'm ready to start the day, right? But anyway, sorry, I just had to put that caveat in there. But right, it's like you should be looking forward to it. It should feel like, oh, this is so nourishing. This fills my cup. And if it's not, if it feels like a burden, feels heavy, and you're like, ugh, I'm doing it to check a thing off the list, you got to look at that. There's something there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Self-care is supposed to be caring, right? It's not supposed to be work. And I think a lot of times when you have chronic pain, you have chronic illness, it is easy for self-care to become like this job that you have and that you have to do all of these things or else you haven't taken care of yourself well. And sometimes, folks, taking care of yourself means not doing the things.
Oh my gosh, yes. Say that again. Yes.
Preach.
Yes.
Now, one of the things I've heard you say on your podcast that kind of ties into this is the fact that striving after removing our pain can actually be the thing that keeps us in pain. And I would love for you to talk more about that, specifically the science behind this. This isn't just a woo-woo thought philosophy. That's real.
Yeah, it is. Yes. So I talk a lot about the vicious cycle of pain because it's like we have pain and then we have this response to it. And that response can really either keep us in a cycle of pain or it can remove us out of the cycle, the vicious cycle of pain, and send us on a different path, which could feel like a path that often feels a whole lot better to be on. And so often what happens is we have what I call this like shrink response to chronic pain. And that's an acronym. And I won't go through the whole thing right here. I'll cover like the essence of it. But if you go on my Instagram, it's like a free masterclass if you want to watch it in detail. But what happens is that we feel the pain and then we feel threatened by the pain. Like its presence sets off our nervous system. And let's be honest, like rightly so in a lot of cases. It's like, oh my gosh, like especially if you weren't expecting it. If you're just sitting there and all of a sudden you feel this insane pain that you've never felt before, it's good to have this like, whoa, alert response. If you put your hand on a hot stove, that's where you want that, like, oh my God, what's wrong? And take it off, right? Like, get rid of it. And so there's a lot of times where this like quick gut reaction, it's a threat, move away. It works great for us.
Keeps us alive, right?
Yes, right. In this acute pain situations where it's like literally moving away from the thing that can cause harm, like a fire, like a knife you were about to slice your hand off with. Like I literally almost cut my thumb off the other day. And it was like, you just feel that cold and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not supposed to be feeling cold on my thumb right now, right? And it's like nothing even happened because like that nervous system reflex is so fast. And so it's like, yes, awesome. And sometimes we'll have that in response to things that are, I'm sure we've also felt that. I don't know if anyone's experienced that. It's such a weird feeling when like you're expecting something to be hot, but it's cold. And it's like you come off real fast and you're like, wait a minute, it felt like it was scalding. And then you touch again, you're like, actually, it's cold, right? It's like your nervous system just gets tripped up. And you know what? In little instances like that, it doesn't matter, right? Like, who cares? You move on with your day. But when the pain is chronic, what it means is that what the pain is about is not an issue with the tissues often, or past 3 months, it really isn't a tissue specific problem. It is the nervous system has increased the amount of receptors in the area. So it's like a physiologic change that happens where the brain has decided we need to pile this area full of receptors, and it becomes hypersensitive. And so we'll use, like, let's say it's usually not temperature receptors, but temperature is just such a good example of it. And just people can conceptualize it so much better. Let's say for whatever reason you're after actually a burn, this is true. Like if you've ever burned your skin, you can just touch something that's warm the day after and it feels like it's scalding, right? That is because there is a ton of those nerve receptors that are sensing temperature. So it is hypersensitive to temperature. And so anything that's even warm will set it off because it's getting such a flood of information. So basically the nervous system is sensitized at that point. And so we have pressure receptors, we have stretch receptors, we have all different kinds of receptors, and we also have chemical receptors, which will also be sensitive to stress chemicals in our bodies. And so we have this oversensitization that happens with chronic pain. And so then we're seeing the pain basically as a threat in itself. And so in the shrink response, we end up either wanting to, the R is like a triple R, okay? Either run from the pain or resist the pain. And we stay in this like tension of it.
Right. Anybody with pain, you know that tension of protecting your body, right?
Exactly. And so when that happens, we end up like really telling our body and sending the signal, this pain is bad. This pain is a threat. And anytime there's a threat, your brain's like, shit, we better know more about it. But it's like, we need to know more about it. And that's what increases. And so then you increase the sensitivity even more. And then you're more likely to feel pain. And then you have the shrink response. And then you just get stuck in the cycle. And I just said, sorry, I said only two of the R's. The third one is resigned to it. And this resignment is this, oh, I'm just going to expect that this is here and this is like here for the rest of my life in this very like apathetic way, which all creates this threat response. And so you can see where that from a physiological mechanism actually will not only increase the pain we're feeling, but make sure the pain stays present because your body wants to just keep knowing more.
Right. And that totally makes sense. I mean, when you're talking about the burn, I was thinking, you get a sunburn, right? And just the smallest amount of warmth, like you said, which could even be like your clothes, right? And it just feels like you're on fire. And fibromyalgia is a little bit like that too, right? Because we have that overactive pain response. We have that crank up, turn up the volume on our pain. And so we have that in a very, very similar way. And then when we focus in on that pain, like you were just saying, like that turns up the volume yet again.
Yes, a lot of fibromyalgia is that hypersensitivity. And I often describe that as it's like a car alarm, right? In that when a car alarm goes off, whether it's going off for a good reason or because you looked at the car the wrong way or, the wind blew in a little too northwest and it just goes off because we all know that car that has like the car alarm that just goes off for no reason, right? The sound is the same. And so same with pain, like the experience of pain is just as intense, whether it's created by this threat response and this hypersensitivity or like a true injury. Just like a car alarm, it's like the sound is just as intense. But I always like to add a third piece here because we all talk about, I think in the mind body world, if you ever heard like a similar example to this car alarm, because it's not like I'm the only one who uses it, it's either like, oh, there's actually a true threat that the body is telling you about, like in the case of your hands in a fire, or there's an actual injury, or there's nothing. And therefore your body's just being like overreactive for no good reason, which is true in some people. Like that is thing. But there's a third scenario. And I always talk about like, we all look at that car that's going off and being like, no one's trying to steal it. Gosh. But I'm like, what if you're actually not seeing that person that's, I don't know, hiding under the car? And so I think a lot of times where it gets missed is there are instances where the body is responding to something it's deeming a threat, but it has no way to communicate it. Or maybe it has tried through the subtle, like, wisdom voice that has gone ignored. And so it's communicating it in a way that it's drawing attention down to our body, but it just can't be like, actually, the threat is your job, right? Like, it's trying to communicate something in it through your body. Like, there actually is a threat it's sensing. And then we have to, like, even split off in that, let's say it's sensing your job as a threat. We still need to be like, is it just thinking it's a threat and it's actually inaccurate because it's, picking up on an old trauma or something is triggering the nervous system? Or is it like your body knows something and it's like, this is not the environment for you and you do need to get out? And that takes nuance and time and willingness to explore. There's no one right protocol for everybody. It's finding out which is true for you.
And I think sometimes that also takes outside help, right? Like when you're living in the fire, so to speak, it can be hard to decipher all of that. And having help is often an important piece of that.
I don't know how you would do that without help.
Yeah.
I need help. I do this for other people, and I'm sure you do it for other people. It's like whether it is someone that you are hiring, like Tami or myself, to really guide you through and ask the right questions and direct you. Or, I'm sure you felt this too in other scenarios where you're just trying to make a decision. Maybe it's not something as loaded as chronic pain, and you just need someone to ask that right question, and you just like instantly know the right answer, whether or not you agree with the person or not. Sometimes you like just need something to push back on, or I do this to my sister all the time. I'll like call her and ask for advice, and I usually am just like, your advice is terrible, but now I know exactly what to do. I'm like, thank you. I just needed to hear you give me horrible advice now.
As a coach, I think that's actually what we do more is ask the right questions more than give the right advice.
Absolutely.
Right?
I know people are always like sometimes I'll be like, here's what I'm putting together, or this is what I'm getting a sense of. And people will be like, no, it's not that at all. It's XYZ. And I'm like, there you go. Awesome. Like, had I not said the wrong thing, it's like you just need that something to respond to a lot of times and someone to just take you through that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't do that. I mean, we can sort of do it for ourselves, but that's very challenging to do for yourself.
So if you're listening and you've tried this for yourself to try to get down to the answers on some of these things, you might need someone to help you with this. And that might be why you're stuck.
100%. And there's no shame in that at all. We are like human social beings and like we're meant to have that interaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another piece of this too is this idea of feeling safe in your own body. As somebody with fibromyalgia, and I have other kinds of chronic pain, I have chronic migraines and things like that. Sometimes your body does not feel like a very safe place to be. Right. And that can also perpetuate the situation, right? Like you were talking about, as we were talking about these added receptors and how, our body pays more attention. Well, if that unsafe place isn't your job, it's your body, now what?
Oh my gosh, I love this question. So, one thing that I talk about a lot is a concept of like body harmony and like body respect. And I think I just want to like preface what I'm going to say too, just with those pieces, because I think when we start talking about our bodies, a lot of people have read so much about this. Was me, by the way, and my clients are similar. So, maybe you relate or not. But we read so much like, oh, you should love yourself, or oh, you should do this. And it feels so loaded to even talk about this relationship with your body because you're like, oh no, I know I don't love myself. And then you just get anxious about it. So one, just if that is you, if you're like, oh God, she's about to tell me to love myself, like, don't worry, I'm not actually. If you do, please keep loving yourself. It's a beautiful goal. That is a really, especially when you've been struggling with chronic pain, especially when you've built up a lot of distrust with your body and there's a lot of contention there. It's a goal to move towards. And I think it is such a ridiculous expectation just to be like, hey, you should move from like loathing yourself to loving yourself. Like you cannot
It's
make
too
that
far,
leap.
right? It's just too far
Absolutely.
away from your experience to be able to make that jump, like jumping the Grand Canyon or something, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And so instead, I just talk about from a place of respect because you can treat someone with respect right? Whom you don't love. Like you can treat someone kindly if you don't love them, right? It's just this mutual respect of like, hey, we're in this together. Like let's say you're stuck in an elevator with someone who's your enemy. I don't know why you're in an elevator with your enemy, but it's like someone you really don't like. You know what? We're going to stick this out together and like let's find a way to be in like harmony together. It doesn't mean we have to fully like each other though. And so part of that is then finding safety in the body. And one place where I think a lot of people get tripped up is how they are defining what safety means. Because if you look up safety in the dictionary, it's going to define it as it's the absence of pain. I'm pretty sure the word injury, I don't have it in front of me, but I'm like, I really feel like it defines it. It's like this without pain, without injury type of thing. And it's like, well, now we're stuck. Now we're in a double bind because I need safety to heal.
But I have to have healed in order to feel safe.
So I say, screw it. You get the cool thing is in this life, pretty much everything's made up. So you got to just make up your own definitions too to find ones that work for you. So that's what I did because I didn't know how to find safety in my body. I felt like there's this double bind there. And I just redefined it to be just nervous system safety. And I define that as your trust that you will move through whatever sensation or experience or situation that you're in and stop. Like you're just going to move through it. It might not be pretty. It might not be graceful. You might have wished you did it completely differently. It's just this knowing of it's like this too shall pass.
And that's not even the way you're saying that. And you can correct me if I'm wrong with this assumption, but the way you're saying that isn't even everything will be okay when I get past it, right? It's just that I will get past it.
100%. And I like to go dark because people will be like, yeah, but what if I don't? Well, I'm like, well, then you'll die. And that's the end of it too. It will pass. And I think someone was like, well, what about if, you're bleeding out? And it's like, well, then on the other side of that's death. Like there's an end. We will move through. None of us, no matter how stuck you feel, you're never completely like stuck forever in this exact situation you're in. Something will change, whether that's physical sensations, moods change all the time. We all know emotions are like waves. Give it 90 seconds, you might be experiencing a new emotion, especially if you're allowing it expression. We're constantly fluctuating. The weather's changing. Our situation is just always moving. And when we realize how dynamic life is, it becomes a little easier to be like, things will just be different. I don't necessarily know how. Yeah, I'm not promising it's going to be. I think it's hard to like not have growth when you have that mindset. But yeah, it's not counting on anything. There's a complete detachment from the outcome. Other than that, things will be different.
Right, right. I think it's so interesting that we're talking about this. And I don't know if I've ever talked about this on the podcast before. So if you've been listening for a long time, you might get something new right here. As you can see the cover of my book behind me, I've used cherry blossoms on all my books. It's in my logo, the podcast cover artwork. And the reason for that is when I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, I kind of started noticing cherry blossoms everywhere. And I started to think, maybe this is a little like tap on the shoulder that I'm supposed to pay attention to something here. So I did a little bit of research on, what's the symbolism behind cherry blossoms? And in Japanese art, one of the main concepts is this too shall pass, that life is fleeting. I mean, you can think about cherry blossoms and how long they're around. It's like a week or two max, right? So it is this idea that whatever we're going through, it's not going to be forever. And it's even maybe going to be short, even if it feels like long. And there's a whole lot more to the cherry blossom thing, but that was the relevant bit. And I think that that is a very important piece for us to remember with fibromyalgia, with any chronic illness, chronic pain. Like that word chronic means it's going to be around for a while, but that doesn't mean it's the same intensity all the time. That doesn't mean how we feel about it is going to be the same forever, right? Like it is going to change and the blossoms will fade.
Absolutely. No, I love that. I love cherry blossoms. That's awesome. That's really, really cool. Yeah. And one thing I want to add to the nervous system safety piece too is I think we've gotten kind of obsessed with this concept of like nervous system regulation, We're like, oh, we should feel totally calm all the time. And so people have started, one, that's completely wrong, but people have started, I've noticed a shift in how clients have come to me basically over the past, I would say, year or two, where there is now oh, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling sad. And there's this feeling of that's wrong. I shouldn't feel that way because I should be perfectly regulated. And so now what's happening, it's so funny because I feel like we've come full circle, right? From like a generation of parents who we didn't feel like we don't talk about emotions at all and we repress them to now we're all like, let's talk about them, but let's make them bad when we feel them. It's like this very confusing place we've come to where I'm like, and somehow we're back at repressing emotions and shitting on them.
Right.
So people feel an emotion and they're like, maybe they're out with their family and all of a sudden they just have this wave of sadness that comes in and they're like, oh, what's wrong? Why am I feeling sad? I'm not supposed to be sad. I should be happy when I'm with my family. And then they get anxious about it and then they judge it and then they wonder why it's there. And then they send their system in a tailspin. And I've been here. I'm not judging this at all. This 100% was what I did too. And so part of this nervous system safety is actually building the capacity and safety to be with all intensity of emotion and being able to hold it all in your body and experience it all fully without needing to regulate it away. Because so often people are using this concept of nervous system regulation as just another way to repress or bypass. And temporarily, I'm all for tools when you got to just get through something, you got to move through your day, you have a big meeting. Like, yeah, absolutely. Those are times where those tools, because they're tools. If you don't want to like start crying in the middle in front of your boss, awesome. Use those tools. Find that like more regulated, calm place. But then you got to feel it somewhere else because it's going to come out in another way if you don't.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's like, I don't know, a little bit of a contradiction here, right? Because we're saying that we need to be okay with experiencing the full range of human emotions, which is basically what you just said, right? But at the same time, some of those emotions don't feel safe. So, how do we feel safe where we're still experiencing all of this? And it can feel like a huge contradiction, right?
All this work is always a contradiction. There's paradoxes all over it. So I think just seeing that, like, we have night and day, right? This is the way I always say it with people of we need to rest, but you know that you don't have to sleep all day, right? You know you need to eat and feed yourself, but we know that we don't eat all day. We know we have to go pee, but we don't pee all day, right? So it's just this reminder we actually have a whole lot of areas in life that we're very comfortable with being like, oh, make sure you eat food today, where we're not like, okay, so you're only going to eat for 20 minutes, 3 times a day, right? Like that we don't have to have all these caveats around and that we're very comfortable with these paradoxes that exist. But within our bodies, with this emotional work, these paradoxes can feel intense to hold. That's where you'll get these different almost schools of thought. And I find so often I mean, some people will say it in an extreme way that I don't agree with, but when you look at the basic tool level, usually so many are applicable. It's that people are using them wrong or only using one tool, right? Like they've taken and they're trying to apply it to everything. Whereas it's like, no, I actually do deep healing work where we are doing deep emotional intense expression and holding and deep trauma rewiring and all kinds of things. And I tell people this is in the container of this session or in the container of here this 20-minute audio I have given you, or you're going to do whatever you're going to do and then no more. And then like you get to do other things in your life. Then you put it away, you pocket it for later. Like we can't be analyzing our emotions at all times or trying to make all the space or trying to do deep healing work all the time, because then we go one crazy. Like it will kind of drive you crazy. I don't have a better way to say that. And it's not helpful. It becomes too much, just like sleeping too much, eating too much, exercising too much. You could be outside too much, right? It's like there is a place for this balance here.
Mm-hmm. I think it's embracing that both and concept, right? Like the world right now seems to be very either or. And we need a whole lot more both and, right? Yes, fibromyalgia is a real physical medical condition, and your brain, your emotions have a part in that too, right? Meditation is awesome, and you could probably take that too far too.
Oh, oh, yes,
Right.
you can. I have had someone who literally meditated, I think for 4 hours a day
Wow.
because it was the only place she felt safe.
Mm. Hmm.
And it was a complete escape. It was a way to escape life.
It would be no different than alcohol or binge watching TV or reading too much, which is my drug of choice, but
Yes.
escapism.
And I always tell people with things like this, like coping mechanisms like this or escapism, again, it's not making it wrong to have those, right? Let's say you do healing work. If you've done it, it's taxing. It is work. I think some people try to be like, oh, it's play. It is work. I don't really stray away from that. It's hard. It can be intense. It can be a lot. And sometimes you do need to escape. It's just doing it with intention. And if your drug of choice is reading or getting outside or meditating, then like, awesome. That's great. That's a much healthier choice. And if you're trying to achieve certain goals in life and you feel like you're getting stuck and you finding yourself escape a lot, there's probably something that you're not looking at underneath.
Right. It makes me think of, for those of you listening, I will put a link to this video in the show notes. Show notes will be at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/136. But there was a video floating around. I can't remember the school, but it was a basketball coach talking about how we need to do hard better, that things are always going to be hard. As you get better at something, there will be a new level of hard. And when I first read that, I was thinking, as a business owner, as you up level your business, like there's always another hard thing, right? And we just have to be more comfortable being uncomfortable. But I think that's true with our health, particularly with uncomfortable things like chronic pain or emotional trauma or whatever it is, right? Like we have to get better at doing hard things because those hard things are actually where the life is.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Like 100% that. I love that so much because one of my big things is finding more comfort in being uncomfortable. This is not about suffering needlessly.
100% right.
Like, I just want to throw in that caveat. Like, I think people will just, again, this is where the black and white thinking comes in, or we just go to extreme. People are like, oh, so if I sprain my ankle, I should just like meditate it away. And
If I'm in an abusive marriage, then I should just be more comfortable with that. No, that is not what we're saying.
no, not at all. It is though, we'll go to those examples though. It is the willingness to see where you are and meet yourself where you are in full like awareness of the current reality that is around you. And a lot of times we don't want to do that. We don't want to look. Whether like, it's almost like not wanting to look at like, ooh, that, wound is gross, right? And it's like, I don't want to look at the mess that just got made. Just don't even show it to me, right? It's like we have that. And it's like a natural reaction. Again, nothing's wrong with any just like kind of quick reaction or just that like instinctual reaction that we have. It's just being like, oh, I can see where I'm looking away and wanting to, again, resist it or run from it or just be totally resigned to it. So we can have that shrink response to anything in life, not just pain. And when we can instead just be like willing to look and like, let's take that abusive situation to be like, here, I am in this marriage, this abuse is happening, and being willing to name it, not understand it from an analyst, but to understand like what's the actual abuse happening and what does this mean for me? Am I physically safe? Do I need to leave this house right now? Do you know what I mean? It's like, what's the level of intensity here to be like, what's my financial situation? Where could I get at? Right. To like, it takes this, like, I got to look head on at the situation to be able to get myself out of it. And I'll use the example of like, let's say you broke a bone and you're going to a surgeon and the surgeon's like, oh, that's disgusting. I don't want to look. We're just going to kind of fix it. And he's like looking away the whole time while trying to like throw some patches at, like, you're not going to feel good about that. You're also not going to feel good if he's just like, all right, let's get in right away and like fix it up. And he hasn't even looked.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we got to like step back and be like, okay, Who are you? What are your goals? Are you a 95-year-old with a broken hip that was already in a wheelchair? So you're not going to walk again. It's just like you weren't walking before this happened and you're not going to walk after. Versus you're a 20-year-old athlete who's a professional basketball player, right? Like completely different surgeries. And it's going to take this moment of let's pause and fully look what can be done. We all run from that pause because we want to jump into like, okay, urgency, that frantic urgency. Let's fix it. Let's fix it. And it's like, no, we got to know what's going on and be willing to look head onto it.
Right. And there's an honesty there that we often don't take time to really see, right? We either jump in and think we know and make quick judgments and things like that, or we don't look at all. And again, we need to find that middle space of really seeing the truth of the matter, right?
Mhm. Yes. So I have like a whole self integration method. And step two is meet yourself where you are. And it's like you meet yourself where you are because it's like only from that place can you then move into, and there's step three, but step four is like aligned action. It's like that's the only way you can take that aligned action. And people can get really tense around that idea because they feel like, well, if I fully look at it or if I come into this acceptance of the current reality, then that means that's how it's going to be forever. And the whole irony is like, actually, if you never do that, that probably will be how it is forever then. Like, that is how you stay stuck, and you will be stuck in it by being like in denial of what's actually happening.
Exactly. 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 One of the things that I've been sort of obsessed with for the last few years is this balance between accepting where we are, right? Because we have to do that. Like the reality of who I am, the body I live in right now, today, what is she capable of? How do different things affect me? Like the reality of my situation. And on the other side, striving for something better, right? Because if we get stuck in either end, it's bad, right? If we get stuck in the acceptance, then that means nothing changes and we're stuck here, right? But we can also get stuck in the striving for better and be so mentally, emotionally in that future place that we're in denial of where we are now. And so we push ourselves too hard. We don't listen to our bodies and all of these other things. And we have to hold this balance between the two, right? Again, it's both and. We need to accept where we are right now today, and we need to not stay there.
Exactly. It's like the holding of both. It's so crucial. And one of the things that actually, after my car accident, probably after about like 6 months, I don't know what point this was at, 6 months, a year, who knows? I came to this place of like, I started asking, like, what if I will always be like this? Like, what if things aren't going to get better? And it was funny because I had a doctor tell me, of course, like very early on, of like, oh, well, that's it. There's nothing more we can do. You're going to be like this for the rest of your life. So get used to it, kind of thing. And it was from like a very condescending, not emotionally validating place at all. Right. So that felt like absolute shit and was really a hard piece to hear. And I like really rejected that, luckily. But then I ended up kind of coming back around to very similar words, but a very different energy behind it of what would I do differently if this really is how I'm going to be for the rest of my life? And what came through so clearly is like I would sleep more because I've always been like a night owl and I go to bed too late all the time because I'm reading too, like you, you know. Dang it,
We're two
books are
peas
so
in a
good.
pod, I tell you what.
So hard to put them down. Still struggle. But it's like I would read more, but actually eat better because at this point I was a nutritional therapist and I was not eating well for my body because I just kind of like given up, right? It's like, oh, here's this one pleasure I can have. I would get back to moving more. It's like I would get outside more. I would say no to things that I don't want to do and not just show up to things because I feel right. It's like this whole awareness. And so I started living that way. And lo and behold, I got better. It's this whole irony of like when I fully came into that acceptance, and obviously looking back now, it's like I met myself exactly where I was. I didn't have those words then. I got better. I moved out of it because I was starting where I was and not doing what I was doing was every day having these expectations of myself and then being disappointed. Or, going through this cycle of like, let me randomly go and run like 10. I literally did this one day where I was like, I'm not even a runner. I don't even run a lot to begin with. And I was like, I should just go and run like 8
Because I
miles or
should
something.
be able to do this, right?
I remember being so mad at my body and I just like put myself out for like 3 weeks. And I was just like, why would I do that? Like, not smart. But you know what? We all need, right? So I was doing this like burn, crash, burn, like, or like, go, 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 crash, crash and burn kind of thing. Cycles, I'm sure we've all found ourselves on, but it was all trying to live in a way that just my body was not at yet.
Right, right. My husband is a computer engineer and he's worked on GPS systems. So we talk a lot of GPS stuff at our house. But I think it's a helpful concept when you're thinking about things like healing or setting goals or anything else, right? In order for a GPS to work, it doesn't just need to know where you're going, it needs to know where you are. Right? If it thinks that I'm in Florida instead of Seattle, the directions to New York are going to be very different,
Yes.
right? Do I go east or do I go north, right? And so if you're feeling frustrated that you're not getting to where you want to go, it might be because you're getting the wrong directions because you're not meeting yourself where you are right now, today, in the body you live in right now, today.
100%. And I think one of the most common reasons for that is because for many of us, not everybody, where we're at today, like fully admitting it means seeing our role in what got us there. And it's like we don't want to admit it, where we're not taking responsibility for ourselves, weren't taking care of ourselves, maybe made a choice that panned out not in the way we expected it to, intentionally or not, right? And so this is where this compassion piece has to come in. And this building of capacity to be with all emotions is so essential, because one of those emotions that I think, I've done a lot of work around building capacity around is being with shame. And just to fully feel it, not to shame myself, but again, it takes the being like, oh, I'm in shame, allowing it to move through, feeling it so I can move out of it. So I can be like, all right, I don't need to beat myself up for this, because I don't think anyone listening to this really did anything no one is going to benefit from beating themselves up over anything. Like all you can do is take accountability for something and move forward from it. That applies to anything. But that taking up accountability can be, for different people, can mean facing some really heavy, heavy things. And so building this safety in our body and recognition of like, this is going to take moving through some uncomfortable emotions or take acknowledgement. And that gets to be like, I talk about titrating it out, and that we're not doing this whole cathartic thing where you're overloading your body with such intensity where you're going into freeze or overwhelm. Because that's not, I think there's like been like a glorification of like having these big emotional releases. And often that's not where the healing comes in. It just throws your body back into like a trauma response. You asked earlier, and I think I got on a tangent, shocker, of like, how do you build that safety to be with these big, intense emotions? And one, it's starting small. And one of the big things about building safety is remembering the definition of safety that I gave, of it's just the willingness to move through. And then I bring it to a physical level of like, do you currently have a physical level of safety? Meaning, not without pain. It's just like, are you trying to do this work in the middle of a busy highway where you might get hit by a car? That's not physical safety. Move out, right? But if you're sitting in your home, if you're sitting outside, right, where it's like, is there anyone coming at me with knives? Is there a saber-toothed tiger that's about to eat me? You know what I mean? It's like, I'm being playful with it, having fun with it, just being like, am I literally about to die in the next 20 seconds? No. Okay, you have physical safety, right? Or next 20 minutes, maybe. Let's give it a little more space there, right? It's where a lot of people will be like, well, I'm not safe because financially I don't have enough money in the bank account. And it's like, well, it's not going to kill you. It's like, okay, well, are there resources? Are there things that you can go to? Do you have the next meal that you can find, whether or not it's through your own money or not, right? It's like, do you have somewhere you can go? And it's just really getting down to the nitty gritty of when you think about how humanity has survived, our bar of safety is really high here, like insanely high. And not that it shouldn't be. I want to live a nice, comfortable life and sleep in a bed every night. And I am grateful every day for the privilege I have to be able to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just recognizing you could literally be living outside and still find a level of safety, of just in this moment, in the here and the now, like I can just be here. And then once you found that, letting yourself feel what emotion is present. And that might just start with, do I feel good or bad right now in my body, right? Like if you don't even want to label anything. And then if you feel, quote unquote bad or you feel pain, you can be like, oh, look, I'm feeling pain or I'm feeling bad and I didn't die. Like, okay, this emotion can't kill me, right? Like it's not, I don't like it. I don't want it to be here, but it's just taking it into this place of, we give emotions, like I work with emotions. I respect the hell out of them. I love working with them, and we give them way too much power. It's like I have worked with emotions that have literally felt like I am being sliced open, and you know what I mean, that are so intense, that are just like unbearable. I can only access tiny bits of it. And it's continuously coming back to this place of like, okay, but it didn't actually slice me open. It's like I literally look down at my body and be like, okay, I'm still okay. We're good, right? Like, okay, that anger made me feel like I was gonna rip my chest apart, but okay, my chest is still intact. Okay, cool, right? It's just this like check and like having a little bit of playfulness and fun with it at the same time, to be okay, like it's intense, but I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back to that safety and then like dipping back into it. So that's a way to play with it. But for people listening, play with a small emotion. Don't play with your intense trauma, please. First, play with something that's like, oh, dang, I'm disappointed that this package that I was looking forward to didn't come today. Play with feeling, oh, what's that disappointment feel like? Like just really like letting it just move through and be like, really fully feeling it, making the sound it wants to make, and just giving it that like 90 seconds of expression if it even needs that much.
Mm-hmm. Right. I was working with a coach once, some things that happened to me as a kid, and the visual that he gave on working with those big emotions, I really, really liked. And he was just, imagine stretching your hand out and just touching it, right? Like we're not
Mm-hmm.
trying to walk into and wallow around in this enormous pile of emotion, right? We're just reaching out and touching the side of it.
Yes, I love that. That's awesome. It's like you can imagine
Mhm.
just like kids doing that to like something too, like, oh, is this safe to like
What
touch
is
or play
this?
with, right? And it's like
Totally.
this, yes, it's like touch and run back, right? Okay. And it's exactly that. Like that's exactly how we can play with emotions of just like, okay. And the more we can fully embody it, which means not regulating it away all the time. Again, there's time for nervous system regulation. I'm only like harping on the not regulating away because everyone harps on the regulating piece.
We're here to be the balancing voice.
Yes. So a lot of times we feel emotions in very concentrated areas. So they're super intense. A lot of times, especially in like chronic pain, where they're super in your head. And like they'll give you like migraines or headaches or just bring this intensity or even like a lot of tears or just like in your throat or in your chest. They're like very top heavy. And when we actually allow them to move into and have the whole body hold them, which is an intense experience. Like it doesn't necessarily feel great, but it feels better than having it really concentrated. It's like you're distributing the weight of it. It's like imagine you went to go get groceries and you're holding them all like one hand versus distributing them between two hands. Right? So it's like when you really like allow your body to hold what it's capable of holding and then like build that safety around like, hey, you can hold this instead of trying to always regulate it away or discharge it away, which can unintentionally teach the body that emotions are dangerous and that they're a threat and that we shouldn't feel them. And oh, there's one present, we must get rid of it. We develop this capacity to just be with, and that as you build your capacity to experience all intensity of emotions, which also includes the good ones, the ones that we want more of, by the way, you get to experience life at such like a richer intensity. Like that sad movie is even sadder and even more heartbreaking, and you feel it with your whole body, but it's like that good, like, oh, I'm alive. And that happy moment is like, again, this full body happiness that we just can't fully experience when we're constricting it all or we're trying to keep it all out.
Hmm. Yes, I love that. I love that. So, as we wrap up, you and I were joking around before I hit the record button that we could easily record a 3-hour podcast, and we could, but we won't today. So, as we wrap up, at the beginning, you talked a little bit about your story. Just give us a few highlights for, I know it is for all of us always complicated for what helps us feel better, but give us a few highlights. Like, if someone is listening and they're like, oh, I can totally relate to her story, what are some things that you would want them to check out that were helpful for you?
Well, first, I want people to know that something that you said earlier, just like things can always get better. There's always things that can be like done and not having it be in this way of, oh, I got to strive for more, and then therefore you're missing out on life. But it's like truly, we get to constantly be growing and shifting and moving towards something that feels even more aligned for ourselves. And so allowing yourself, I think one of the biggest things was letting myself get the individualized help because I was trying to do so many things for protocols that just were not working for me because I just needed like deeper work. And having someone to guide you along that path, like not needing to do it for yourself, I think it's really common with chronic pain that we are like this, we got to control everything. And we don't want anybody else to step in, and that we have resistance to anyone seeing our stuff. It's like, I can't let anyone know I'm a hot mess behind all of this, or
Right. Or an expectation that we should be able to do this
do
on
it
our own.
ourselves. Exactly. So, really, truly, like actually allowing myself to receive support that felt really aligned for me, which meant moving through a bunch of different people and allowing myself to be like, yeah, nope, 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 this isn't working. And like actually listen to my body. But working towards building a trust and a connection with my body was, I would say, the overarching theme of my work. And that was through many different modalities, but it was all towards like, what is getting in the way of me fully being able to trust and live in this body that is mine? I don't get another one. And so, like, how can I be okay with what I was like granted in this lifetime and eventually be more than okay with it and love her? But it's like I had to start with just the being okayness. So allow yourself also to take these baby steps. That was another thing, is allowing myself to let go of some of these like perfectionistic goals that were actually holding me back because I was rejecting everything that was not good enough. And like
Right.
allowing myself to take baby steps and celebrating them. But yeah, I've never been asked in that way before. So
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And you and I, again, have quite a few similarities. That idea of, how do I build this relationship with the body that I live in? Right. Because I'm not getting another one. This is it. So, how do I understand what she's saying to me? How do I listen to the clues that she's giving me? How do I understand what makes her feel better? What makes her feel worse? And respecting that, like you were saying, even if you don't love that body yet, you can still respect what she's telling you, right? And just honoring that. And like you were saying, with, if you go to a massage therapist and you don't feel awesome afterwards, that's okay to not go back and to find somebody else, right? It's okay to say, you know what, this isn't what my body wants right now. We need something else.
yes, and using all of those things that don't work as these awesome data points to guide you towards what does. Because I think oftentimes people will beat themselves up for like, oh, that didn't work, something's wrong with me, versus like, oh, okay, deep tissue, I did not like that. My body did not respond well. Okay. Yeah, you got some recovery time. It sucks. It's annoying. It's frustrating. But like, okay, I'm not going to go back to deep tissue. Let me explore. Ooh, this type of massage is really gentle and soft, right? And it just gets to be this exploration without needing the outcome to be something specific. Like sometimes a, quote unquote bad outcome can be one of the most helpful and telling things. And so
Yes.
it's like letting
Yeah.
that be, I guess. And I just really want to enforce the individualization, especially if you're working with someone. So it's like one thing that my body carries is like massive amounts of intergenerational trauma. So a lot of my specific work has been in how do I, again, be like, I can heal some of it, but it's more than anyone can heal in their lifetime. And so, kind of coming to terms with that is how do I hold it and allow it to strengthen me and not be this thing of, here's this burden that I'm stuck carrying around, but actually, like, wow, here it gives me this like really unique perspective and like way I experience life. And so, learning how to be with that. But like, I mean, I've talked about intergenerational trauma, but like, not all my clients need that. Not everyone carries this intensity. Like, I've only really worked with one or two other people that probably where it's been more of a focus, whereas other people, it's kind of a background thing. So it's just, I think that's one thing that I like to, as you're looking for somebody, somebody who's not assuming what is true for them is true for everybody. Like it's great when people have their own experiences with what worked. And at the end of the day, any like individualized work is always coming back to what Tami said, what works for your body. And it's like they're acting as an interpreter between you and your body. It's almost like your body is speaking a different language and they can help with the interpretation. But at the end of the day, it's you that has to step forward and listen. And we're just facilitators for that. And it's so helpful to have a facilitator. Oh my goodness, do not underestimate the value of that. But we cannot do the work for you.
Right, right. It's like having a translator, right? If you don't understand what your body is saying, I don't live in your body, but I can understand some of the clues because maybe they're similar to mine. I can kind of translate a little bit, but my goal isn't there to always be translating for you. My goal is to teach you that language, right? So that's where that individualization comes in. And I think the risk of having our episode go a little longer, I think this is one of the things that can be tricky with group work versus one-on-one work. And I think that sometimes group work doesn't allow enough individualization, particularly for people who have not yet learned their body's language. And I really feel like the group work is better for like education, like the classes I teach, of course, are groups, or for people once they've gotten to a certain point where they actually understand what their body is telling them and they just need maybe group support to, keep going kind of a thing. But I think at the beginning, that one-on-one time is really, really crucial because everybody's body speaks a different language and what works for you is different. What you need is different. The trauma, the background that you come in with is different.
I completely agree because it's like I run a group and I love my group and like the members will rave about it and have such actually one of them just told me they're like, oh, a bunch of us all just like met last night on their own and then we talked about how amazing it was. I was like, okay, that's like the most amazing thing I've ever heard. Okay, I
That's
love
awesome.
that. Okay, apparently they're doing group without me. I love it. And so, and I do one-on-one. And so it's like when I'm doing a consult with somebody, which is, open for anybody to schedule if they want to just be like, which is right for me? Where do I start? Like, that's where I have a free consultation where it's like, let's figure it out. But I'm always making that determination. So there's a lot of times where I won't offer, even tell anybody about the group when I'm like, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I'm recommending someone into the group, but I don't think it would help them. I can usually tell pretty quickly if someone needs that individualized support up front or if it's like, okay, yeah, group is going to be great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. I agree. I agree. Well, as we really wrap up this time, I would love for you to just like speak from your heart to the people listening, particularly the person who has been a little bit frantically looking for the next thing or filling their day with all the things that they have to do to take care of their pain, right? Like that busy, busy, busy person.
Yes. Oh, I just want to invite them to take a breath and be like, it's safe to breathe. It's safe to have that pause. And likely in the pause, stuff's going to come up, which is why you want to be busy again, because it won't feel good to be in the pause. And it doesn't feel good to be busy now either, does it? So see if you can find the space to be like, okay, I'm going to give myself this pause. Again, not to feel great, which is what a lot of people will tell you. It's actually like, oh, let me sit in kind of like the muck of what's really here. because in that pause, in that space, your body will let you know exactly what it might be running from in the busyness, whether that busyness is activities throughout the day or like the household stuff, or busyness of, quote unquote, healing things that you're doing all day long, probably something underneath. And it takes that intentional choice of willing to shift the pattern and do the really uncomfortable. It's going to feel so uncomfortable to sit in the pause, but you just do it. Start for 30 seconds or 1 minute and just do a little more every day and give it time and spaciousness. It's not going to happen. That you might not get the message the first time.
Right. We can't be chasing after those pauses either.
Exactly. I know people will be like, I sat in silence for 2 minutes and I didn't hear life's answers. Yeah, no, I know. It might take a while. It's like you almost have to like rebuild back that trust. Your body's like, can I trust you to hold this? Like, are you actually going to listen? Right? It's being willing to meet yourself where you are. And you're listening to this podcast for a reason. You got this far. You listened to us ramble on for like, I don't even know how long now, for a reason. I know that you want things to be different, and you just get to take this next baby step, this invitation to take a breath.
I love that. Thank you so, so much for being here, for sharing your thoughts and your insights. And for you listening, hang on. There's several podcast episodes that have come to mind as Andrea and I have been talking here, and I will list out a couple of those as a wrap up if you're interested in exploring this idea more. We'll also have them on today's show notes at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/136. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I love this.
And that wraps up my interview with Dr. Andrea Moore. I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. These are really, really juicy topics for people like Andrea and for myself, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Now, as I said at the end there were a few podcast episodes that popped into my mind as we were talking, and I wanted to share those with you here if you want to explore these ideas further. Of course, you can always go check out Dr. Andrea's podcast. It's Unweaving Chronic Pain. We'll have a link to that in today's show notes, fibromyalgiapodcast.com/136. I'll also list out these episodes that I'm about to share with you. So one of the episodes that came to mind, of course, is episode number 2. Yes, all the way back at the very beginning. This is actually the first real episode of the Fibromyalgia podcast, because episode 1 is really just kind of an introduction. Welcome to the show. Here's what you can expect. But episode 2, Your Body Isn't the Enemy. It is such a foundational concept for finding ways to heal from fibromyalgia that it really was the first real episode that I recorded. So go check that out. I love the way that Dr. Andrea talks about respecting your body, even if you can't love your body. If love feels like jumping over the Grand Canyon, start with just respect. But to get some more ideas, some more concepts, the main premise of episode number 2 is that your body is not the enemy. Fibromyalgia, if you have to have an enemy, make fibromyalgia your enemy, but your body is not the enemy. You and your body are on the same team. You want the same thing, which is to feel better. And the information in episode 2 can be really helpful in expanding your understanding there. So go check that out. The next episode is episode number 9, The Fine Art of Self-Care, where I talk a little bit more about what I think self-care is and what it isn't. Self-care is not bubble baths and meditation and eating good food. Those are things that we do because we are practicing self-care. Self-care is really more about the attitude that you have towards yourself, the way you talk to yourself in your own head, the care, the concern, the compassion you show yourself. And you can learn more about that in episode number 9. Another helpful episode is Dr. Andrea and I were talking about getting to know your body and really getting to know what are the things that help you feel better, what are the things that make you feel worse, and really starting to understand what your body is telling you, episode 47 can be really helpful. This is an assignment that I give all of my students, and it is to write your body's owner's manual. So it is an exercise that will actually walk you through starting to write down some of what you learn about yourself. For instance, I do not have appointments before 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning because my body does not like that if I don't do that. So you can learn things like this about yourself, start making notes of it, and really put together a book that is about you. So, episode 47, Write Your Body's Owner's Manual. Another piece of this equation that Dr. Andrea and I didn't really talk much about is your fibromyalgia wellness style. Your personality, your natural bent in life, right? How you approach life affects your fibromyalgia symptoms. And this, I cover a lot more, the science behind it, how I created the Fibromyalgia Wellness Style Quiz. That is in episode 133. So just a few episodes ago. But go check that out. Go take that Fibromyalgia Wellness Style Quiz. It'll really give you some good insights. If you are the perfectionist, you are the one who is constantly checking everything off. And if you can't check everything off, it causes you stress, right? If you are the playmaker like me, you want to do everything that's fun. And sometimes the things that are good for us aren't necessarily fun. So what do you do about these things? What do you do with your fibromyalgia wellness style? The cool thing is I have put together a email, sort of an advanced profile instruction sheet that I will send you if you sign up for it. Of course, the quiz is free. The advanced profile is free, but I do need your email so I can send it to you. It comes actually over like 5 or 6 days. I break it down into fibro-friendly, bite-sized pieces. You can go through and learn more about your fibromyalgia wellness style, what your strengths are, what your unique challenges are, and really how to improve your fibromyalgia working with your personality, your natural personality, instead of trying to improve your fibromyalgia symptoms in spite of who you are. We want to work with that. So you can find more information about all of that in episode 133. We'll also have a link in today's show notes where you can take that quiz and sign up for those email tips. Again, today's show notes, fibromyalgiapodcast.com/136. And last, I have got this week's listener shout out for you. And this comes to you from Ruth. This is an email I received from Ruth. And Ruth, if you are listening to this, I want you to know that your email made me laugh so hard that my husband asked what was going on. And it was not because really what you said was all that funny, but just because it is so classic. So this was Ruth's response to taking the Fibromyalgia Wellness Style Quiz and finding out what she was. Her fibromyalgia wellness style was perfectionist. And she says, "This is a really good description of me. I'm about to go on holiday for 5 days, and I'm stressing about the fact that I won't be able to stick to my health regime instead of being excited about my trip." And that is such a perfectly perfectionist way of putting that. And I wanted to share that shout out today because, one, I thought it was funny, and I thought you guys who are fellow perfectionists would appreciate being stressed about not being able to check off all your boxes instead of being excited about the trip you're going on. But also just to highlight some of the things that Dr. Andrea and I talked about today. Sometimes you need to do less in order to get better. And sometimes all of those things that we do and all those boxes that we tick off actually get in the way of us living our lives. So if you find yourself in a position where, stressing over the fact that you can't do all the things you need to do, instead of being excited about living your life, that is a good sign that it's time to maybe reach out for some help. Sometimes having that person come alongside you, like Dr. Andrea and I were talking about, to help you shift those perspectives, to see what things you need to keep, what things could go. that can be super, super helpful. So, of course, you can connect with Dr. Andrea. I highly recommend her podcast, Unweaving Chronic Pain. You'll find that wherever you listen to this. You can find her podcast. It'll also be in today's show notes. Or if you'd like to work with a certified fibromyalgia coach or one of my students, you can also do that as well. That is at findafibrocoach.com. And again, that'll be in today's show notes. See you guys back here next time. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse. For daily doses of hope, inspiration, and practical advice, come hang out with me on Facebook. Visit facebook.com/fibrocoach to find my personal coaching page and connect with me directly. To find the show notes, additional resources, or to schedule a consultation with me or one of my coaches, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com.